Our favorite punchy pugilist defends the honor of his fallen friend against communism? Rocky 4 is next. So, guys, when I was a kid, Rocky 4 was my favorite Rocky movie. You know, you've got the USA versus Russia, and everything's shot really clean, and it's a big MTV movie. But then I got in my 30s, and I'm like, this movie's really just two fights wrapped around three musical montages. There's not much of a film there. And so I rated it pretty low. As a matter of fact, on my very first Ask Drew, if you go back and look at that, my friend Ben asked me to rank the Rocky movies, and I ranked this lower middle of the pack. I think I ranked Rocky Balboa ahead of it. And I'm like, I've got a lot to say about this movie. But then it placed pretty high on a community poll, so I thought I'll review it. So I've watched it a couple of times here in the last week. And so will it hold up? Will I still think it's not all that good? We're going to get into it now. So the plot of Rocky 4 is very simple. Like all the other Rocky movies, you've got the continuity of the last movie into this one, where they have their fight at the end of Rocky 3. And so, Rocky and Apollo are friends now. And, this was at the height of the Cold War of the 80s. So you've got, Mikhail Gorbachev and Ronald Reagan. And so they're really playing that up in this movie. And so you've got these Russians invading the United States, and they're challenging Rocky Balboa to an exhibition match. And Apollo Creed, especially after the rumor is in that fight at the end of Rocky 3, he beat Rocky. Whether you want to believe that or not, nobody was there, nobody actually saw it, but he's still got this burning desire left, kind of like Brett Favre when he was a quarterback, or Tom Brady in more recent years as a quarterback who retires and just keeps coming back and keeps coming back. Got that fire and can't let it go. And so he wants to step in and face this Russian and prove it to himself, that he's still got what it takes, even though he's been retired for like 4 years. And of course, the actual match ends up fatal for Apollo Creed. And so they're really building up this character of Ivan Drago. And of course, Ivan Drago's played by Dolph Lundgren, and he's just a presence. I won't say he's a great actor in this movie, but he's a big physical presence, and you really fear for, especially Rocky later when you see the difference. But for Apollo in this, they show his punching power. So then we get the musical montages, of course, of Rocky. Can he do this? Can he face this Russian? There's no easy way out. Against the wishes of everybody else, he agrees to fight Drago in Russia. And so there's these great montages there in the snow and the ice and what's Russia. And then we get the fight at the end of the movie and a little monologue from Rocky at the end, because you got to have a Rocky monologue at the end of one of his movies, right? So first off, I have to say, going back and rewatching this for the first time in like 10 or 12 years, this is an MTV movie at its finest. Everything is crisp and bright, and Sylvester Stallone actually wrote and directed this. And, those original Rocky movies are kind of smoky old movies, especially when you get to the fights, everything's dark. This movie's lit up, and you can see everything. It's visually pretty striking. So in my opinion, Stallone really did show off his chops here as far as how to light something, how to direct something. And while this might be two fights set amongst, a bunch of musical montages, there is a pretty good theme going on here about a man's guilt, for letting his friend down, for not throwing in the towel and letting him, be murdered in this match, and him living with this guilt and redeeming himself at the end of the movie. And they did a really great job in this movie as far as bringing back characters that you love, like Rocky and Adrian and Paulie and even Duke, and then integrating new ones into this. You've got Ivan Drago, and you've got Brigitte Nielsen, who would be Sylvester Stallone's wife not long after this in Cobra, as Ludmilla, and the actor that was their mouthpiece. So those characters are really cool. And man, Carl Weathers as Apollo Creed, I love him in every one of these movies that he's in, and he's just as brash here, probably more so. When you see him in that scene where they've got James Brown doing Living in America, and he's come down dressed as Uncle Sam. That's just, man, Carl Weathers was the man, and I love him in these movies. You've got Burt Young returning as Paulie. He has this great exchange with Rocky right before that final fight. He's been there with him training in Russia, and he says, Rock, if I could just step aside from myself and unzip myself and be somebody else for a minute, I'd want to be you. You're all heart. And that's paid off later when they're shaking gloves there in the fight, and Paulie's in the ring with him. He's like, Rock, how I said I wanted to be you. Yeah, forget it. This is amazing stuff there from Burt Young, and I don't know if that was written or he ad libbed that, but that was just some amazing dialogue. Stallone's performance in this is pretty understated. He's dealing with the guilt of what happened to Apollo Creed, and he didn't throw in the towel because Apollo told him not to, no matter what happened. I love that fact. He said, no matter what. And then there's a scene later where Rocky and Adrian reconnect there in Russia in the snow. And she says, I'm with you no matter what. And Rocky's like, no matter what? No matter what. And so I like that theme goes throughout this movie. Speaking of Apollo Creed, there's a great visual there where, he gets that fatal punch from Drago and he goes up against the ropes and falls down. And as he's falling and hits the mat, the towel drops from Rocky's hand. So he falls and it falls. And just some great imagery there. Speaking of imagery, there's this great scene where you've got this poster of Ivan Drago, hanging from the banister up top, and then you see him in the ring, and they're both in the same shot. That's really cool. I hope Dolph got to keep that. That would be really cool to have just to hang in your gym or something. And speaking of that fight, Stallone and Lundgren weren't holding back all the way. Occasionally they were trading live rounds, and Stallone told Lundgren to actually hit him a few times. And so there is that story where Lundgren hit Stallone like dead in the chest, and Stallone started having blood pressure problems and couldn't breathe, and he had to be air evac'd to L.A., to get help, because it's basically what happens in a car crash when you hit the steering wheel, where your heart moves closer to your chest. And yeah, that was kind of crazy to think that, these two big guys are trading live rounds. But then you look at Stallone in a movie like Bullet to the Head, and him and Jason Momoa were doing the same thing, and Stallone was in his 60s then. So just a crazy dude. But I wanted to say the music in this movie is just amazing. Whether you've got the training montages with Rocky, where they're playing Hearts on Fire, or he's going to Russia and they're playing Survivor's Burning Heart. Robert Tepper has a song in this called No Easy Way Out, which is amazing. Me and Ben, my friend Ben the Wolfman, we like to talk about how this soundtrack to this movie is amazing to just go on a walk or a jog or work out to. It's very inspiring. But that scene where he's dealing with the guilt of Apollo Creed and he's driving through the LA tunnel, No Easy Way Out's playing. That's just some great stuff right there. And then you get to that scene where he gets home and Adrian's waiting at the top of the stairs for him, and Stallone's shot in shadow partially. That's just some really striking imagery there. But I wanted to talk about that a little bit because, aside from that scene, there's very little with Rocky and Adrian. Rocky and Adrian were the heart of these movies in the first two, for sure. And then the movies started kind of decreasing a little bit as far as like a storytelling thing and becoming more of a fight thing. This movie is missing that, with the exception of that stairway scene where she tells him, you can't win. Just really good stuff. They try to do a little bit more there, like I said, in that scene in the snow in Russia. But I feel like this movie's missing a little of the emotional core, the heart that Rocky and Adrian give the first couple of movies. And the only other thing about this movie that kind of gripes me, and it's not really that big of a gripe, but it's the monologue at the end. And I kind of wonder, how Sylvester Stallone feels about this, seeing it now. He's just beat Ivan Drago. During the fight, Drago's this machine and he's coming at him, and he starts losing his confidence because he just can't beat Rocky, because Rocky, you can punch him 500 times in the face and he never goes down for some reason. But the crowd gets behind him and Rocky comes back, and they're cheering for him, and he has that scene at the end where he's, if I can change, then yous can change. And that whole scene, to me, is just, I don't want to say it's cringeworthy, but you look back at it now and you're like, ugh, that's not all that good. Let me know what you think about that scene in the comments. It's kind of divisive for me. I like what he was going for, but I just don't really like how it played out. So I guess the final question here with Rocky IV, was it as bad as I remembered in my 30s, or was it as good as I remembered when I was a kid? And like I said, I've gone back and I've watched this twice in the last week, and I really enjoyed it the first time, and I watched it from a critical standpoint the second time. And yes, there are just a bunch of videos wrapped around some fights, but it is so well done. I do like this movie more than what I did, 10, 12 years ago. I'm going to give it a 7.5. I think it's really good, and it's actually probably now my third favorite Rocky movie after the original and Rocky 3, which I like just a little bit better than this one. I'll have to go back and watch it again just to be sure. But it is a lot of fun. Yes, there is a lot of 80s cheese there, and there's a whole lot of music videos in this thing, but there is this undercurrent of friendship and remorse in this movie, and I think it's definitely worth exploring. So, guys, I'd like to thank you for watching this review and just listen to me ramble about movies that I like. And, if you like what you see, be sure to like and subscribe. And I appreciate all of you guys. I should have that 100 subscriber appreciation video pick coming up here pretty soon. After that, I'm not sure. I'm filming a bunch of stuff, and I'm not sure what order I'm going to release them in. So just stay tuned for what I got in store. As always, I'm Andrew, and I'll see you down the line.